Welcome to another episode of Supy Talks. Today, we're going to be talking about how to build a profitable online food business. With me in the studio, I have Ramzi Al Omari. Thank you for joining us, Ramzi.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me. Shout out Supy Talks.
Thank you. Tell me a bit about yourself, Ramzi. Who is Ramzi?
So I've lived most of my life here in the UAE, but I started my career in F&B about 8 or 9 years ago. I was selling a SaaS solution called Ep.8. You've probably heard of it before. It's
Probably yes.
a big food delivery arm of big name called Uber. And I was doing that for about 2 years out in San Francisco. Killed it there. Did a good enough job to move to the Dubai office. Did the same thing. Then I moved to the cloud kitchen space. Was managing sales as well. Establishing relationships with restaurants here in the UAE. This was peak COVID, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So when people were shutting restaurants down, I was out there on the phones trying to establish partnerships to get people in to operate in our cloud kitchens across the UAE. That was on the supply side. And I always wanted to be on the demand side of the F&B industry.
Closer to the food.
Yeah, closer to the food. Absolutely. So I was headhunted to manage the entire food delivery business for a company in Qatar. They're actually the largest hospitality operator. 45 brands, 90 outlets. My goal there was to grow the entire food delivery business. So I joined there, did about 2.5 years, achieved my goal. And today I'm taking all of my experience and learning and going out there on my own to build our marketing agency. So that's what I'm doing today.
It's an impressive background you have there. And
Thank
I'm
you.
seeing that you're very active on LinkedIn as well, sharing a lot of really great industry advice, which I really appreciate as well. And especially one reel that really stuck with me was the one that you were, I believe, in an Iranian restaurant where you were you were bitching about restaurants having too big of a menu. And that restaurant had a small menu, and that was like a really good thing. But what was that actually?
Yeah, I was in Ustadi, and we were just hanging around having good lunch, as you always have in Ustadi. And I was asked to talk about menus in general. And I had the menu in my hand, and I was looking at it, and it just came to my mind over the last couple of years. Of course, in this industry, I realized that the shorter menus win. The ones that have a concise, straightforward offering are the ones that the consumers prefer to order from, especially when it comes to online. Gone are the days where restaurants are offering 40 to 50 menu items, right? I think the restaurants of the future are ones that specialize in one cuisine, one niche offering. Sometimes we even see restaurants that specialize in one item and they're doing an absolute killing.
Yeah.
So, there are certain factors that obviously determine why operators should have a shorter menu. And I think as we move I think consumers want to make decisions faster, especially when it comes to online, and shorter menus help consumers do that a lot easier.
It's also easier to manage their food costs, obviously. We've seen that with Supy as well, that if you have a shorter menu, especially if you have just a smaller amount of ingredients to manage, it's easier to bulk purchase your items from suppliers. You also just have less wastage because, you have higher turnover of these single items instead of having a big menu. So I guess from the cost side, it's more efficient, but also from the revenue side, it seems that if you have a smaller menu, you're well known for something and people want to come back and remember you for this. So
absolutely,
it's a good point to see how this really impacts both bottom and top line.
Especially if you're a new concept. We see a lot of operators that are coming into the space today, or let's say want to be food operators, that come into F&B and don't really know what options or what food to serve the end consumer. So it's a lot more simple and easy to specialize in one thing versus having different types of cuisines. We see operators have Japanese, American, Chinese, Italian, all in one menu, right? It also gives this impression that you don't focus on anything. You're not good at anything. As an end consumer, people think that you don't really do anything really well, right? So even from a kind of I'm talking purely from a consumer point of view, we would trust places more if we know for a fact they absolutely kill in Asian cuisine. They do a great job in having, the best pizzas or the best pasta versus a restaurant that has every single thing and claims to do every single thing well. It's just literally not possible.
Okay, so Ramzi, I've been seeing a lot of your reels and it seems that you are bashing a lot on some operators in the market. Would you say that the majority of the F&B operators don't really know what they're doing?
I wouldn't say bashing, but yeah, it's a spicy question for sure. And I think for moments like this, we need something to show how spicy that question is.
And what is that?
Which is why I've brought
oh my God,
this legendary spicy sauce. If you've lived in Dubai, you know exactly what this sauce is. It's basically the best sauce in town. And I would say that there are a lot of operators out there who don't know what they're doing. People underestimate the difficulty of running and operating a restaurant. Today, there are certain things that give the impression that operating and owning a restaurant is very easy to do. In fact, it's very complex and very difficult to do, right? And there are a couple of reasons for that. Cloud kitchens, for example, when they first hit the industry, it was an easier solution versus opening a restaurant, and it still is today. It's a lot cheaper, it's a lot faster to scale, a lot faster to open. But at the same time, the way that it's explained to the mass, it's put in such a way that you can just get up and running and everything will be fine. And on day one, you're going to be having 100, 200 orders, when in reality, it's not the case.
So let's do your research, right?
Absolutely. You have to do your research for sure. Before you do anything, you have to do your research, especially in a market like Dubai and the UAE, where food is massive, right? It's, by the way, Dubai is the second most populated city in terms of restaurants. In terms of restaurant density, Dubai is the second most ranked in the world. So there's a lot of concepts here in Dubai and in the UAE. A lot of
competition, of course.
And of course, with competition as well, right? If anything, that means that you should focus more on doing research and understanding how you need to stand out. Otherwise, you will absolutely get killed in this market if you don't know what you're doing and you're coming in for the first time. So yeah, to go back to your question, there are a lot of operators who don't know what they're doing. And there's also a lot of people who are underestimating how difficult it is to operate and own a restaurant.
We've seen the same thing when it comes to understanding the costs that are associated to any recipe that you're selling. We've seen a lot of operators, they just jump into just putting something on their menu, but they're not really understanding what should be the normal food cost. Should it be 30%? Should it be 40%? Should it be 20% of your revenue that you're making for a menu item? And this is actually a really important industry benchmark that we would like to offer to clients, which is understanding where should your food cost be for a particular item. A lot of operators just don't know this and they just jump into, oh, I'll set it at this kind of price. It looks fair, but actually it should be based on a food cost, but also should be based on what competitors are pricing, as you have mentioned too.
I think there's a sort of standard across the industry, right? People automatically assume food cost is about 30% of cost. Is that the case? Is that what you're seeing is the case in general, or can it be lower? Can it be higher?
Typically, it would be rather about 25% in this market, though it can obviously vary on the type of cuisine and also on the menu category. Like typically, side dishes have a lower food cost. You make more margins there. But on main courses, especially on like specialty main courses like steak, you'll have higher food costs. But then the idea is that you want to maximize your profit by tying these menu items that have a higher food cost with those that have a lower food cost, so that eventually what you're selling on a table, you're making a decent margin. That's in the topic of menu engineering, as we love to say it. Like, what's your take on how to build a menu?
Yeah, I think, as I said before, the first thing someone should focus on when they're looking at building a menu is having some sort of specialty, focusing on one cuisine instead of taking on all these different cuisines. But it is an interesting thing to take into consideration where you have these items that maybe you would price a little bit higher to make certain items look a little bit cheaper so you can draw more customers in. That's an interesting way to play with menu. It's menu psychology, right? Menu engineering at the end of the day. So I think, as I said before, there's a lot of things that need to be taken into consideration, especially when it comes to designing and creating a menu, not only from a cost perspective, but also from a menu psychology perspective and what you want to offer to the end consumer. But I would love to ask you as well, since this is, what you guys are solving for at Supy, which is amazing, really. Hats off to what you guys are doing. In terms of menu engineering, what would you say is like the ABCs of menu engineering?
Well, menu engineering is really all about just categorizing everything that you sell on your menu, from your starters to your main courses to your desserts to your beverages, into 4 categories where you are going to categorize them either by calling them a star, which means that they're very profitable and they contribute a lot to your revenue. On the opposite side, you have your dogs, which are those that don't contribute in a lot of revenue and profit. And then you have the puzzles, which are essentially those menu items that have a very good unit profit, but they don't sell a lot. And on the opposite side, you've got your plow horses, which sell a lot. They bring in a lot of revenue, but not a lot of profit each time that you sell them. It's all about really understanding how each of them have their role, because obviously not all of your menu items can be stars, because it's always relative. Each menu item performs relative to another. And typically you also want to only look at your menu items within the same category. So you want to compare your starters with your starters, your main courses with main courses, and really understand how you can employ certain small tactics to make them drive your top line and bottom line even better. Very common example is where the example of the steak that I gave before, a steak is typically a plow horse. It's going to bring a lot of revenue, but it doesn't bring a lot of profit because it's a very expensive ingredient, and typically people are not willing to pay an extremely high price for it. But no one's going to eat a steak on its own. You're never going to go just eat a steak. You're always going to tie it with a beverage or with a side dish, such as fries, which are typically then your puzzles, which are the ones that they don't sell that much, but they bring in a lot of unit profit. So that's how you can construct a mix on your menu and let these menu items work together. So that by the end, you can have a pretty decent bottom line. Now, of course, you're going to have certain menu items which we would call dogs, which they don't sell a lot. Despite efforts, you're trying to promote them, but they're not selling a lot. They don't bring in a lot of profits. You'll typically think of removing these from your menu, but there's only one reason you would really keep them, and that is for your point about menu psychology. Sometimes you'll just have items on your menu just to look other items look cheaper. It's not really the most beautiful tactic, but it is what works. And people will consider, for example, that a steak is reasonably priced because, the lobster is so much more expensive. So let me just go for the steak. So that's one reason you would keep it, if it makes sense that it doesn't cause too much wastage for your restaurant, because every single menu item that you're offering, supposedly you need to assume some client is going to order it at some point, and that means you have to keep it in your stock. And if it's an item that is very perishable, which is fresh produce, it requires proteins, of course, keeping it in stock and no one's ordering it means you're going to have to waste it at some point, which is also adding to your food cost. So it's really about just understanding your numbers and really making a trade-off. Is it worth keeping it on the menu, considering all the wastage that's happening? And scrapping of your menu is just a decision that sometimes you need to make.
That's a great point. And these are things actually I'm also learning for the first time as well. It's not something that I would have a real specialty in. It would be interesting to understand your perspective on, would you apply a strategy in which you're increasing the price of one item within the same category versus the other item to make that category sell more? Or would you say it only applies cross categories? You
could. It really depends, of course. Again, here you also need to look at what your competitors are offering. If you're a steakhouse and you're considering, there's a certain item which is relatively commoditized, let's say a Wagyu of a certain grade that you're selling at a certain price. If you're competing in the price category, let's say you're not a fine dining operator, you're more, let's say, casual dining, you need to understand if your price is going to now cause that you're going to look expensive in the eyes of other competitors, then of course that's a consideration you need to take into account. On the other side, if you can position it as a more unique dish that some other operators are not going to have, then of course you have more wiggle room when it comes to increasing the price. Or at the same time, you could also, for example, introduce other side dishes that are, let's say, even more profitable. So you can tie it with that same menu item without touching the initial price. There's always a lot of tactics you can employ just to get the overall bill that you have on the table, to get that to a certain food cost that is acceptable for you as an operator.
I think it's fascinating. Try to explain this to someone who's never been in this industry, right? Going back to what we were saying earlier, people rush to get into this industry because of the ease, let's say, or the false perception that getting into it is very easy, right? Yeah. So this is something that not everyone really understands and would even look at or even consider.
It looks so fun on the outside, right? Oh, running a restaurant, it must be easy.
It looks like the best thing and the funnest thing in the world, but actually you have to be crazy to love F&B. You have to really be crazy to love it.
Because when you're making your money is when normal people are relaxing, right? Like the peak hours that you're making your money is evenings, weekends. It's not an industry for lazy people.
No, absolutely not. No, it's not. It's not something that you can get into thinking you're going to sit on the beach while your team manages everything at the restaurant, right? No. I know operators who have been in this space for 25 years, and still when you go to their restaurant on weekends, weekdays, they're sitting there talking to their team day in and day out, right? So again, going back to the fact that this is an industry truly for people that want to build a brand and establish a certain type of reputation in the market, that takes time. For some reason, everyone believes you can open a restaurant one day and tomorrow you're going viral, right? There are a lot of anomalies in this industry.
Or become a big chain.
Or become a big chain, right?
That's what everyone loves to believe. I'm going to open a coffee shop. I'm going to be the next Starbucks. Great.
Yeah, absolutely, right? I mean, I would rather, there are certain examples in this industry where you look at, take Fix Chocolate, for example, right? Massive success. But people forget that she's been in this space for 5 years before that, 4 years before that, grinding, hustling before the content went viral and things really took off, right? again, I was talking to someone recently, actually, it's a mutual friend of ours, and we were having this conversation, and she was telling me something quite interesting. She said, everyone wants to eat the omelet, but no one wants to crack the egg.
Love it.
Yeah. So ultimately what that means is everyone wants the success of having this viral brand and this place where everyone is going to and people are having your products and people are there, in, out, tables are turning like crazy. But no one wants the struggle of actually taking the 3, 4, 5 years to build an establishment that brings those people in, spending the money on marketing, right? Those days where there are no orders, those days where things are frustrating and truly you feel like you don't want to be in it. It's very much a mindset game as well. And I think that doesn't just apply to F&B, that applies to everything in life, not to get too philosophical here, but it applies truly specifically to our industry, right? You have to have the mindset of longevity. Otherwise, you're just going to get crushed.
100%. And it's so important to keep that consistency as well. Like, I think you've touched upon it in one of your reels that it's not just about designing the perfect recipe and then you're opening your restaurant and great, amazing food and people are coming to it. It's about really maintaining that consistency and being able to deliver that quality over and over and over again. That is really difficult. So
quality and consistency. Quality and consistency is the name of the game, right? People come to you and try you for the first time. They expect something, especially when they have a great experience. They expect to have that every single time, right? So if you look at the best operators and ask them, how did you get to where you are today? I'm offering a quality product and I'm doing it every single time. And it transcends just product. Now we're going into experience as well. So dining is becoming more experiential within certain categories. But genuinely, I believe from what I've seen in my experience, there are certain touch points that you have in a dine-in space versus you have in a delivery format, right? So you have a lot more touch points when you're at a brick and mortar location versus when you're just selling to people online. Right. So regardless, quality and consistency needs to be there in whatever format you're serving. It is the name of F&B. It's the name of the game. That's why franchises are super successful, right? Because no matter where you go, you know your meal is going to taste the same in one country versus the other country.
Yeah. So speaking of franchises, it's actually an interesting business model to look at. Like when you take a franchise, you're not owning the brand. So you're taking less risk because you're working with an established brand. But at the same time, you don't have as much control because you don't get to also take decisions on like what technology you get to use. Sometimes, it gets constrained and imposed by the franchisor. Would you say that taking a franchise makes sense? Like, would you do it?
I feel like this is a spicy question. We need to get the hot sauce out for this one. Does it make sense? I think it depends. If you're getting into the industry for the first time, it could make sense because everything is sort of set for you. You have your SOPs, you have your standards, you have your processes, your systems, and you just have to execute properly, right, accordingly. But if you're kind of looking at it from I want this as a side hustle or as an investment point of view, it could look like something that may not be a good idea, right? So again, it depends on the person. It depends on their appetite. For me, franchises, again, solve that problem of brand. They've been in the space, whether it's local or global, and they've validated the concept, right? So that is also a positive in terms of franchises, and everything has kind of this give and take. But for me, I'm more marketing kind of point. I'm looking at it from a marketing point of view.
Yeah.
You're taking all those years to invest. Someone else has invested all those marketing dollars into establishing a brand name, and you're kind of coming in and just growing it from there. It makes sense.
Yeah. Look, from a technology point of view, I do also resonate with taking a franchise is actually a good thing to do, because typically a franchisor will be the organization that will determine what technology is used, which it really sounds as a constraint. Like, I have to use this point of sale, I have to use this inventory system, I have to use this accounting software. But the reason why I do think it makes sense is because it gives this level of support that the franchisor can offer to its franchisees. Because ultimately, a franchisor wants its franchisees to be successful because they take royalties on the revenue and the profits that they are making. So when a franchise operation has consistency across its systems, it can also make it easier for the franchisor to benchmark and to understand who's performing well, who's underperforming, and can give certain strategic advice, as in to say, hey, your food costs in this specific branch, it's not really up to the same standards as the other ones. Maybe there are some issues in your supply chain. Maybe there are some problems with your SOPs. So these kind of issues can be flagged if a franchisor has access to that uniform data that they can look at. So I guess from your point of view, and also from the point of view of technology, it's really, really interesting to see that taking a franchise is actually a very good, safe bet. It's a very supported system that you're signing up for. And eventually it can teach you all the skills to then later on build your own brand. Because ultimately, if you're really passionate about food, you probably really want to try something of your own. But I guess it's a good stepping stone for getting into the industry.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And you mentioned cost. You're talking about food costs, right? I've met a lot of franchisors who have vertical integration. So what they're able to do is manage the entire distribution and production of their items, which they can then sell to the franchisee for cost plus, which helps the franchisee manage food costs, right? And that's a benefit you have in the market. If your food cost is sub 25%, like you said, is somewhat of the average, then you can come in and offer real value to consumers with quality and take over the space and really build a good, loyal customer base. There are great franchise brands here that have been wildly successful. I think in the GCC as well, we're seeing a lot of homegrown concepts. People love to support local concepts, right? So I think now that we've talked about franchise, having a local concept as well is something that could be quite interesting, except the fact that you need to invest heavily in building a brand name, which takes time to do, right? Like we talked about.
100%. And I have another spicy question for you.
I should bring out the hot sauce then.
You should bring out the hot sauce.
Let's hear the question first.
It's really about building an online food business. Now, there's a lot of... I'm getting there.
I know this is going to get spicy. Yeah, I'll keep
Bring it on. Keep it ready.
Will do.
So there's been a lot of talk about aggregators, and aggregators, they take such large commissions and they don't allow us to be profitable. What's your take on aggregators? Like, are they really the devil that F&B operators say, or is there a way to build a profitable business while still working with aggregators?
There is a way to build a profitable business while still working with aggregators, for sure. And anyone who tells me aggregators charge too much, I say that they have, and this, again, a bit spicy kind of point of view, but they can charge that because they have the reason to do so, right? Look at the number of transactions that are happening on these delivery platforms on a daily basis. It's a live market. Hundreds of thousands of people are ordering with the intention to order, not just to scroll. Sure, you have a couple percentage points, people are just scrolling, shopping around. But if you look at the intention behind ordering food on delivery platforms versus someone who's seeing food on social media like Instagram and TikTok, the intention on delivery platforms is a lot higher. So their pricing is somewhat justified. I also tell people who complain about high aggregator commissions that they shouldn't focus too much on what they cannot control. In fact, you can bring those commissions down if you play ball with the aggregators. Ultimately, what they're looking for is a restaurant that delivers volume. They want restaurants that are credible. They want restaurants that people are ordering from. And they also want restaurants that can be consistent in terms of meeting operational KPIs. In the early days of aggregators, people could buy positions at the top of these pages and win customers. But I think over time that model has changed because delivery platforms have realized that buying your way to the top is not a sustainable model. They don't want people that can just buy their way to the top of the aggregator and those pages, but keep their drivers waiting for 30 minutes. And then the order is late to the end consumer and the customer leaves a bad review. So yes, aggregators are charging high, but I think it's somewhat justified. People who are in this space using that as an excuse as to why they're not performing, I don't think is the right mindset to have. The things that you can control, you should focus on: building a loyal customer base, building good reviews, generating orders. The aggregator is the place today to get people to order food from you. It simply is, and it's not going to go away.
As long as your food cost is in check. That's what our point of view would be, is that, yes, you can look at these aggregator costs, the commissions are very high, but if your food cost is above 35%, 40%, of course you're never going to make profit.
No way.
That's something you can control. You can control your food cost today, and then you can still make a good profit because there are still a lot of successful restaurants on these aggregators.
Oh, 100%. There are many. There are many for sure. And food cost is part of the equation. If anything, I would argue your food cost is probably one of the most important things outside of marketing on delivery platforms in terms of turning a profit on delivery platforms. Because don't forget, you have to account for their commission. And you also have to account for the fact that if you're a new operator, you need to give reasons to people to try you for the first time. No one has ever heard of you before. You don't have reviews. You don't have credibility in the market. How can someone who's looking at you for the first time order from you organically? Not saying it's impossible, don't get me wrong. It can happen, but you need to incentivize them. And usually in this market, because it's a very value-driven market, the end consumer is expecting a discount. So when you look at discount, you look at aggregator commissions, and then you're looking at food costs, you're left with very little. And we haven't even talked about your other traditional costs yet. right? So yeah, there is a way to deploy strategies to ensure your orders are profitable, but you need to do it in a proper way. And again, you need to do it over a certain period of time. Nothing happens overnight, truly.
That's very interesting. I want to pick your brain on something else. It's not spicy. You don't have to take out the sauce. But
I'll take this off for now.
We cannot be having a podcast about online food ordering, etc., without talking about the biggest trend, the buzzword that is, of course, dominating all industries.
Sure.
AI. What's your take on AI in food?
AI in food. I'm seeing a lot of involvement. I think a lot of operators or even solutions today are using this as a buzzword to grab attention. And of course it works because globally it's a subject that is very talked about. This region specifically, I believe there are a lot of people that still don't understand AI and the power of AI. And I don't see solutions today helping other people understand how they can use AI to better drive efficiencies, better reduce costs. There's a couple of players, of course, Supy being one of them for sure. But AI in terms of F&B, I think we're only seeing the start of it, and it'll continue to grow more and more. There are a lot of solution offerings in F&B for sure, and there are a lot of ones that really don't need to be there, right? Yeah. So I think it's a buzzword for now. There are people that are operating and using AI as a tool to help operators succeed in this industry, but it's not being done in such a way that is truly revolutionizing F&B. I think the last revolution we saw was in the cloud kitchen space, right? They really came and shook up the entire industry. AI is yet to do that. We will see it. It's yet to happen, though.
I agree with your point of view. The thing is that F&B and hospitality in general is still an industry that always will be very driven by human touch. Okay, if we're talking about online ordering, perhaps less, because there is a way of automating more of that. When you go to a restaurant, you will still want to be served by a person, especially when we talk about fine dining,
100%.
Casual dining. That human touch will still always be quite important.
Never change.
And I think also one very, very important limitation for AI is that if the inputs to whatever system that is based on AI aren't accurate, the output is just going to maybe look fancy, but it will not be really insightful or useful. Like we've seen this a lot with ChatGPT, like, you ask it a certain question and it just really goes delirium. It spits you out some answer that really is based on nothing. It invents information in some cases. And then you have to call it out and it actually admits you, oh yes, this was based on nothing. And like, I am also yet to see in our industry, in F&B, where AI is hopefully focusing a little more on fixing the inputs rather than sprinkling it on top of some data and then making it look like a fancy output. And we've seen this as well, where people say, we have an AI-driven dashboard, or we're going to do forecasting, etc., and it's going to tell you how much you should order from your suppliers based on historic data. But okay, in theory, this really works well, but AI is also going to have its limitations when it comes to inputs that aren't that correct. And it's not going to yet have that ability to figure out whether something is really just incorrect. And it's going to give you a recommendation where if people then become lazy and just are going to rely on, whatever the AI says, we're going to just take it, it might really lead to wrong results as well. And another limitation of AI, I find, is that AI will never be able to understand the nuances of human relationships. And if you are an F&B operator, you're dealing with a lot of human relationships. You have your staff, you have your suppliers, you're dealing with the government, you're dealing with customers. Let's say that you're dealing with a supplier and, your supplier gives you a certain credit term. You need to pay within 30 days. And if you don't pay, then we're no longer going to supply to you. Let's say that's the formal business rule. But there is an element of relationship where, you're a little bit late, but you're my friend, it's fine, I'll keep supplying to you, etc., because I trust you, because I know, you're connected to my nephew, whatnot. So AI is not going to pick that up. He's just going to be very cold and rational about, this is the business rule, we apply it, we don't apply it, and we give recommendations based purely on that. But it's not going to take into account that nuance of, I trust you, you're my friend, I don't trust you, you're not my friend, etc. So as long as the AI cannot solve that piece, I think any industry, and F&B being one of them, will still have its certain limitations when it comes to relying on AI to make any decisions, because there's always going to be that element of taking a business decision where you need a human to understand the nuances of the relationships that it impacts and then to act accordingly.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Very well said. And it's not something that a lot of people take into consideration. People expect AI to just be this thing that spits out results and just have output. It's in fact the input that AI must take into consideration to give out an effective output, right? You look at the way that GPT is being used today, right? It's only as effective as the prompts that you give it. In fact, there are courses and languages that you must learn when it comes to speaking with AI. Otherwise, maximizing and utilizing it to the best possible outcome is really not there. It's a great point. I think a lot of people also misunderstand AI as well. I don't personally understand all of it, to be honest. It's a world that is way beyond me personally, but I think it'll be interesting to see how it evolves over time and also how it can balance out with, like you said, that human factor of hospitality. Because I genuinely believe as well that there are a lot of SaaS or let's say solutions that are taking away from the human touch. We need solutions that work they work with humans, right? It needs that input, right? Yours being one of them. Right? You need accurate input of information, right? So it must work with humans in that way and not take away from the hospitality or the experience or, a guest. You can never replace a waiter or waitress giving the smile at the front of the door of the restaurant, greeting guests in, right? That's a 100%. Feeling that you can't replace, even with robotics, impossible to do, right? So I think AI is, if anything, it should support us in a way of making the industry a bit better. And we have to find ways to get people to work with it instead of it just being this problem solver solution and fixing everything when in reality, I don't believe it to be the case, at least for now. Maybe things could change. I don't know.
Yeah, indeed. We're yet to see some big applications of it in F&B, but we'll keep our eyes out now. But what's your take on software as let's say that you're an F&B operator, you've been on that side of things. What's your take when it comes to assessing what technology you use? How would you pick your vendors?
I think that's a good question. Look, like we talked about, right? Managing food costs is one of the biggest things that you must be able to do and learn and know how to do as an operator. So a solution that helps me do that, manage my suppliers, manage my food cost, understand as well from a data perspective, what will help me ultimately increase sales and decrease cost as well. So for me, I would be looking and choosing solutions that would give me the most amount of data, right? Because even if we let's take a step back. Even if we talk about data, a lot of people still don't have the right solutions that give them the data. A lot of people don't have the right people to understand and examine the data and analyze the data. And then a lot of people don't know how to even extract logical potential solutions from the data. So there are various stages and steps that you need to take with the information that you get from solutions, whether it be Supy solution or other solutions, to have the right people in place to understand and draw certain conclusions and execute based on those conclusions. Today, that's somewhat lacking, right? I've actually seen Supy in action, and it is one solution that I think is imperative and critical for every operator to have. It's absolutely critical.
Well, look, our mindset is very clear around it, and it agrees mostly with what you say, is that a software is always going to have these limitations of it's never going to replace that element of a human critically thinking about what insights, that what are the actions you need to take to, as you said, increase revenue, decrease costs. And that's why we really believe that the time is over for these generic softwares that just do on paper what you think is needed, because there's always going to be the element of interpretation. And that's where industry expertise is always going to be essential. And that's why we really believe in being a specialist software that caters for a specific industry, which in this case is F&B, and also handles only a scope that we know that we can build sufficient expertise in. You cannot be an all-in-one software and at the same time understand everything that's going on. And because, like we said earlier, it's such a complex industry. Everything that's happening on how do you manage your staff? How do you manage your inventory? How do you manage procurement from suppliers? How do you manage your sales, your online marketing, your reservation system? There's just so much to handle, and it just got more and more complex as internet grew and consumer behavior changes. So we believe in being a specialist software so that the people that work at our company can truly give industry advice along with that software. So it's not just like, hey, you can do your processes, you can just functionally do what an inventory should do. It's about giving you advice into how should you truly run your inventory? How should you build your recipes? How should you be procuring from your suppliers? How do you run your stock counts so that it's done as per certain industry standards that really allow you to get those insights that you can truly improve your top line and your bottom line? Because otherwise you're just buying a software for the sake of it, which some people would be tempted to say, okay, it's an all-in-one software, great, it does everything I need to. but the people behind it will never really understand the problems that you specifically are interfacing. So that's really our take on it, on how software should be built.
And I couldn't agree more. Right? I think there's, as like they say, there's riches and niches, right? You're solving a specific problem, and that's a problem that a lot of people have today. The most successful F&B businesses are not successful because of their marketing. In fact, they're successful because of their operations, like what we talked about earlier, right? Going back to quality and consistency. Supply chain and procurement is a massive element to that, right? Giving the right quality at the right price every single time for a long period of time is how you succeed in F&B. On top of course, giving that experience, right? And staying engaged and staying aware. So hats off to what you guys are doing. No, seriously, I would 100% recommend Supy as a solution to any operator, whether they're existing in the market or looking to get into the market for the first time.
Well, thank you very much. And I still have a few questions for you.
Sure, we're not done.
One may still be a little spicy. Time to bring it out.
I'll bring it out then.
It's related to, again, one of your reels.
I love this sauce, by the way. It's literally, there's nothing better than this sauce,
Do you have
honestly.
a brand partnership with them?
No, I don't. They're not plugging this.
No?
No paid sponsorships.
No
I think we should, maybe this is the last time we bring the sauce out.
Last spicy question. It's about cloud kitchens, because there's a lot of buzz around. Should you open a cloud kitchen? Yes or no?
You should open a cloud kitchen only if you're looking to test a certain concept.
Mm-hmm.
You should not be in the cloud kitchen business if you're looking to build a brand name, right? But if you're looking to test the concept and validate a certain idea, cloud kitchens are the best solution, right? And for reasons that we talked about earlier, it's cheaper, it's faster to scale, faster to set up. So the model of cloud kitchens actually has changed since they first opened, right? When we first saw cloud kitchens in the industry, it was peak COVID. And the models that we were working on was getting people to basically expand in our cloud kitchens, and we would manage their entire operation. We've seen that change. Today, what we're seeing is a lot of people renting spaces out, right? That's the kind of model that seems to be working today. And as I said, there's this misunderstanding because of the ease of cloud kitchens, how difficult the industry is. So again, it depends on the mindset. Honestly, I think the answer to that question would be, it depends on the mindset that you have going into F&B to begin with. Is it a passion project? Do you see yourself really genuinely being an F&B? And if so, is the cloud kitchen the right way or right thing to do? Although it could be cheaper, as I said before, you have different touch points. So if you're in a pop-up, you have, your branding, your signage, your lights, you have the team to kind of greet the guests. But if you're in a cloud kitchen and you're running a virtual brand, the only things that you're touching the customer with is the photos that you have online, which, by the way, are critical to success on delivery platforms. How big your menu is, like we talked about earlier. Your packaging, right? Packaging also plays a big part, and your branding as well. So we're talking about 4 or 5 things, really. Everything else is out of your control. How fast the driver gets to the door of the customer, that's kind of not in your control. You have control over prep time, but everything else is not really within your remit, right? Whereas if you're looking to build a brand and you want more touch points, which give a customer more of an experience with your concept, then maybe a virtual brand and cloud kitchen is not the way to go. So it depends on what you're looking to do. It's a great idea to get into a cloud kitchen to test a certain concept and validate a certain idea or a cuisine or concept in a certain area. You do that for 3 to 6 months. 8 months, a year, and then you decide whether or not you want to open a brick and mortar or continue as cloud and continue to validate certain concepts. Regardless of whether or not you want to open a virtual brand or cloud kitchen, you need to be in the mindset of longevity. It's not a game that can be won with fun coupons. You need to be strapped. You need to have cash. You need to be able to manage your OPEX, and you also need to be making sure you're spending on marketing, because again, less touch points means you have to spend more on the branding and marketing side to get people to convert with you. I hope that answers the question. I think somewhere there was like a maybe, a yes, a no. But again, it depends really. It
was a great answer indeed. And thanks for that. And
Appreciate it.
Maybe some last takeaways on what are some other tactics to increase the profitability of your brand that you're building? Let's say you're an F&B, whether you're online, whether you're brick or mortar. What are some other tactics to look at to really improve that bottom line and just profitability in general?
Yeah, absolutely. A good question. Don't rely on discounts. It's a very value-driven market here in the UAE. People are looking for discounts. There genuinely is a lot of people that only will order from you if you have discounts. The second you remove that discount, they're not ordering from you. There's 2 things there. They're not your customer, number 1. Number 2, you're playing with discounts a little bit too much. It's not a bad thing to experiment with discounts, but to revolve your brand truly just around discounts is a very dangerous thing to do. You can burn your brand very quick and very easily there. So that's tip number one. Discounts are not a bad thing. Play with them and experiment with them in moderation. And look at the data to understand whether or not it's actually driving sales. And there's different ways to experiment with discounts, right? So that's number one. There are different discount types too. Number two, as I said before, value, right? So when you look at the ideal menu today, it has something for the single, it has something for the couple, it has value meals, it has combos, it has a few starters, a couple of mains, and of course, 1 or 2 desserts here and there. There's no need to overcomplicate things, right? Social media also plays a very crucial and important part in getting your brand out there. You cannot rely fully on aggregator platforms, especially because of the microeconomics of your discount, commission, and food costs. And after that, you have very little to play with. So running a proper social media strategy is equally as important as focusing your efforts on performance marketing on delivery platforms as well, right? So I did a video recently and may be online already. I was talking about, what is the biggest opportunity in terms of content creation for restaurant operators today? And for me, I think the biggest opportunity is taking the camera back of house and showing the authentic documentary style view of how a restaurant is running.
Amazing.
Instead of the end result of this cheesy burger, which looks nice, by the way. And by the way, I've gone to restaurants because of how insane the food looks. Sometimes I've been disappointed. Other times I was extremely impressed. But social media is also an amazing tool. Although the mindset is not to get, people are not in the mindset of ordering right then and there when they see your content on social media, but it's more of an awareness tool. Right? You want to stay top of mind. The UAE has 18,000 restaurants today. Competing with that many people is not easy to do. So the more content, the more things you put out there to get people to see you top of mind, ultimately the more conversions you're going to have. And they may not convert on the first time, but the second time they see you, they'll check your menu. The third time they see you, they'll refer you to a friend, right? Check this place out. Or I've tried this place, it was really good, right? And then they become a loyal customer over time. So again, I always revert back to this. It's a time game. I had someone get upset at me the other day saying that I was telling them to be patient too much.
Interesting.
It's the first time I've ever had this happen to me, by the way.
Yeah.
Right?
How did you handle it?
I handled it, with grace, of course, with grace and respect. But I stand by my guns. F&B is a long-term game. If you want to be in this industry, you need to play for the long term and make sure that you're offering a quality product every single time to every single guest in a very consistent manner, and you'll build a loyal customer base over time. It's as simple as that.
Without burning the bank as well.
Without burning a bank. But you also need to be strapped, right? You have to make sure you have the funding to be able to survive 2 or 3 years if things are not happening the way that you want to happen, right?
100%. And then there's an interesting trend as also we've been observing is that so everyone's bashing around aggregators are so expensive, etc. That's my previous point. So there's the alternative of going into direct ordering channels where people build their own food apps, for example, and allow people to directly order from these brands that they really want to order from. So what's your take on these?
I think the option should be there for sure. We've seen it happen in the past, right? So when you have a loyal customer base, ultimately, wherever you ask your customer to go, they will go for you, right? Because they want your product really, really well. I do this even to this day. My favorite brands, in fact, it's only one brand, but some of my top choices that I love to order day in and day out, if they have an app, I'll order from that app directly, right? So it's definitely something that the restaurant should give to the customer in terms of an option. But again, they shouldn't rely fully on D2C.
Because it doesn't give as much brand awareness, probably.
Not necessarily, but I think going back to aggregator commissions, people look at aggregator commissions being so high, but at the same time, if you look at the cost of acquisition of a customer via social media or direct to consumer, arguably it could be higher, right? So if you're paying 30-35% commission to get the customer who has the high intent to order via aggregators, you'll probably spend a lot more on brand awareness, targeted campaigns, boosting your Instagram profile, the costs behind creating organic content. It could actually come out to it being more expensive than 30-35% commission on each order. Right? Okay. But D2C is extremely important. I think every operator should have a D2C channel anyway, right? Because you also get the ability to collect customer information and customer data, which is not possible. You get to own the data, which on aggregators today is not possible. You don't even know who's ordered from you. The name is just there. But then again, the name is not enough.
It's not aggregated. You don't have like insights like, with the age and the gender and
absolutely demographics, all these different things. You don't have access to any of that data, right? So D2C is a good option to have a channel in which you can basically collect consumer insights. With those consumer insights, you can run campaigns more effectively. You can do marketing more effectively. You can be more efficient with your spend. Ultimately, your customer acquisition cost goes down and you have more profit. So D2C is ideal. But again, with everything, it takes time to do that, right?
Yeah.
But it's a great question for sure.
No, that's really interesting. Look, thanks, Ramzi, for being with us in the studio. I think
pleasure.
This was a very insightful discussion.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Hopefully we can go and enjoy the spicy sauce now. We
Absolutely.
can go get our favorite burgers in town.
For sure.
Thanks for coming over.
Pleasure. Thanks so much for the conversation.